Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome back to the Lucky Paper YouTube channel. Very special series we're beginning today. I have completed a rotisserie draft of my Bun Magic Cube with a bunch of people. Some people you will know, friends of the show. We got Anthony, we got Parker in here, we got Steve from Cube Heads, as well as some other folks, Zach Barish, Scott M, and Evan, who you may not know. And we are going to be going through every single match I'm going to play, so all 7 matches I'm going to play with this deck, and recording videos of them. So, haven't played anything yet. I just want to review the rotisserie draft briefly, do a little deck tech for my deck, and then I want to talk about all of my opponent's decks, how I think the matchup's going to go, and how I expect to sideboard, and make some predictions, basically, for how things are going to turn out. Basically, because I think the better I am at predicting the outcome of these matches, that's a good indication for my understanding of the game. So, yeah, let's just kind of start reviewing this overall rotisserie draft here. Alex got the first seat and took Lurrus, totally reasonable. Steve takes Ragavan. Evan falls up with an immediate red card, taking Lightning Bolt. And then we get to me. If I'm honest, I think at this point, the correct pick is either Uro or Urza Saga. But to be honest, I didn't really want to play an Uro deck again. I've played Uro in the last 2 rotisserie drafts of this cube, and it just, people always keep giving it to me, and I don't want to do it again. So I opted to just take red and 6. I was in a red and 6 mood. I know it's the 3rd red card in a row, but I really want to play red and 6, so I just took it. My hope with this pick was that I'd be able to wheel the Deathrite Shaman. I am really high on Deathrite Shaman. I think it's fantastic in this cube. I think a lot of people underestimate it. I thought maybe if I took red and 6, I would wheel Deathrite Shaman and could draft a sick Jund deck, but as we see here, Parker also values Deathrite Shaman very highly. And a theme of this draft is that Parker and I evaluate cards very similarly, and our decks were stepping on each other quite a bit. Spilled some water. Anyway, so the draft proceeded pretty typically. I kind of staked out some green-red. Alex staked out black-white, but then decided he was going to play Kroxa as well, so Alex is some kind of Mardu. Steve looked like he was going to be red-white early. There's a change to that later on. Zach was kind of blue-white control from the beginning, I would argue. Scott in a blue-red tempo deck. Parker ended up playing this sort of Sultai value, the rock deck. And Anthony just went hard on mono-white and just totally committed, which I respect. I think his deck ended up pretty good, even though there were many other white drafters. So you can just force it turns out. It worked pretty all right. Everything was going fine for this draft. Going along just as you would expect. Right here until about pick 9 rather, where Evan takes Mawloc from me. This is unacceptable. I'm very frustrated at Evan. You've made a horrible mistake, and I will punish you for it. No, I think here green was looking very open. I almost refer to myself in the third person. Only Parker and I were in green at this point, and so I think Evan was shopping around for a third color and waited to see what was going to be open, and green was in fact it. So I gotta respect the taking of Mawloc. I didn't expect it to go this early. I thought my staking out of red and 6 early would let me get like a mid-draft Mawloc, but pick 9's pretty early, so I did not get a chance to take the Mawloc, and that also signaled that Evan will be fighting me for some of these Jund cards. At this point, I was still hoping to be Jund until Mawloc Gate, and then given that Evan's already in black-red and took Mawloc, I expected that I had to get off of Jund, and I decided to actually play Naya, which might be a little weird considering how many other white drafters there are, but you notice there are no green-white drafters, and the only other red-white drafter is Steve, but at this point, Steve had taken a bunch of blue cards, so I figured that the gold cards, basically, for Naya is what I was mostly interested in, and that's what I ended up taking. I didn't get as many fetch lands as I wanted. I think if I have one regret of this draft, it's that I didn't take fetch lands more highly. There were things I felt like I had to take early to stake out my claim for my territory, and then like once again here I took this Windswept Heath and I expected to maybe get a later Prismatic Vista, but Parker proving that he also evaluates that card similarly, and Parker and I both want fetch lands quite a bit. Me for my red and 6 mostly, Parker for his Uro and Deathrite Shaman. So Parker and I were really stepping on each other this draft, taking each other's fetch lands, all that. I only ended up with 4 fetch lands. I wish I had more. I think my mana is okay. Like, I'm not worried about my mana fixing. What I am worried about is just not having enough fetch lands to make a card like red and 6 as good as it can be. So I ended up, honestly, I took red and 6. We'll get to the next betrayal in this draft. I took red and 6 early, partially because a recent addition to this cube is Life from Elome, and I really wanted to play Life from Elome, and I thought if I staked out the better lands matter card like red and 6 and the Wasteland, that Life from Elome would be a freebie. I would just get late. I figured once I have these two, I can take Life from Elome like the last pick of the draft, and it'll be free for me. And then we see here Parker. taking it here in pick 16, which was way earlier than I expected it to go, and I honestly never expected anyone else to even want it. Parker has Boseiju, but Parker told me he's mostly playing this as a way to self-mill into Uro, which, I gotta be honest, if it works for him, I'm thrilled, because I would love for Life from Alone to be played not just alongside Wasteland and other sort of land-based shenanigans, but if you just actually want to play it as a self-mill card, then that's really sick. And I hope it actually works out for him. But I also felt a little bit betrayed, and my deck suffered a little bit there, because I was definitely staking out a lands matter theme, right? I've got Wrenn and 6, I've got the Wasteland, I've got Field of the Dead, Titania, and then later on in this draft, we'll see that I picked up a late Tireless Tracker, a late Gaia's Cradle, Knight of the Reliquary, Lotus Cobra. And then Thalia the Gitrog Monster, which was me getting Parker back. Parker thought he was going to get a late Thalia the Gitrog Monster, but I ended up snapping it up. So, two can play at that game. So yeah, I ended up in this sort of like Naya lands matter deck. We can look at the deck list in a second. I'm trying to figure out if there's anything else to discuss here about how this draft went. Obviously, we could go into a ton of detail about the various backstabbings in this draft, but basically, the key notes for me are that Evan came into green when I didn't expect him to, which is kind of a bummer, and so I lost out on some high-value cards there. And then Parker and I were fighting over cards the entire draft, and he ended up valuing some things more highly than I expected him to. I did not expect him to take Life from Alone. What else did I really want? I was hoping to put together Exploration plus Life from Alone plus Courser of Krufix and Augur of Autumn. I think Exploration is a really cool card that's relatively new to this cube, but I'm not sure how viable it is. I think you want a lot of support for Exploration, and with Wrenn and 6, Life from Alone, and those two things let you play cards off the top of your deck, that would definitely be enough. But then when Parker got the Life from Alone, I was like, okay, I think I'm off that strategy. So I started ranking Courser much lower. I didn't get the Courser. I did get the Augur of Autumn, and I ended up not taking Exploration at all. Parker took it, and is he playing it in his deck? Let's check real quick. No, he's not main. Oh, he is. I'm sorry. It's up here in the creatures. He is main decking Exploration. So I hope it works, honestly. I think it'd be very cool if Parker can pull this off. All right. Let's take a look at my final build, because I definitely had a couple directions I could go with this build. What I ended up building here is definitely like a kind of quintessential mid-range deck in this cube. And it has a Lands Matter theme, as previously discussed. So Elvish Reclaimer, Lotus Cobra, Deeproot Wayfinder, Knight of the Reliquary, Tireless Tracker, Thalia the Gitrog Monster, Titania, Wrenn and 6. That's our full sort of Lands Matter package. There's a lot of really explosive lines this deck has access to. So it's not a consistent ramp deck. We only have Arbor Elf, Utopia Sprawl, Wild Growth as 1-mana ramp. And the only other ramp spell we have is Lotus Cobra. So it's, technically Knight of the Reliquary is also a ramp spell. It's a little bit late to be ramping, but it is a ramp spell. So it's not a consistent ramp deck. It's not often going to start on mana acceleration, but all of the mana acceleration is very explosive. So Arbor Elf in combination with Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth makes these enchantments essentially tap for 2, so they ramp for 2 for 1 mana, which is quite a bit. The sequence of turn 1 Arbor Elf into turn 2, one of these lets you play a 4-drop on turn 2, which is pretty disgusting. Lotus Cobra with the fetch lands and the other ways to get lands into play, like Elvish Reclaimer and Knight of the Reliquary, is the other source of very explosive ramp. If you have a Lotus Cobra and a Knight of the Reliquary in play, which, that's already kind of like late game, essentially, and if you can stick those two and untap with them, you deserve a big reward, but obviously you can go nuts by, tapping Knight of the Reliquary, sacking any land, to go and getting a fetch land, and to sacrificing that fetch land, to go and getting another land. All of these landfall triggers trigger Lotus Cobra, generate a ton of mana, and the mana sinks in this the mana sinks in this deck are mostly our Scavenging Ooze. We have a little bit of a mana sink in Pia and Kiran Nalar, and the clues from Tireless Tracker. Again, Tireless Tracker, obviously, with all of that combined, a huge source of card advantage. Augur of Autumn, also kind of a mana sink in that it just effectively draws you cards over and over again. And Shatter Skull, I bet this deck will at least once cast a giant Shatter Skull Smashing for, 8, 9, something like that. Fingers crossed. So it's a very explosive deck. It's a more synergistic deck than a lot of mid-range decks in this cube tend to be, which means it's also going to be a little more fragile. I think a deck with a lot of removal will be able to keep me from getting all of this value off of these explosive synergies. And in those situations, I just have to rely on my solid mid-range 2-for-1 cards like Bonecrusher Giant, Fable the Mirror Breaker, Wrenn and 6, Pia and Kiran Nalar. These cards that are just going to, on their own, really stabilize the board and support things. So, a couple other spicier things included in this deck. I do have a Green Sun Zenith here for a little Green Suns package. I have a green creature at every mana value on my curve, one of them being Thalia the Gitrog Monster. This is the first piece of spice here. So I think his card's going to be very matchup dependent, and I went back and forth a lot on whether or not I wanted to main deck it or just side it in matchups where it was going to be good. And I ended up deciding to main deck it in combination with Winota. And these two together are part of this spicy package. So Thalia the Gitrog Monster is a human, a very high-value human to hit off Winota, as is Pia and Kira Nalar, Tireless Tracker, Knight of the Reliquary, Augur of Autumn. So those are my hits off of Winota, which is not that many. That's not a ton of humans to hit off of Winota, not as many as most decks would like, but I have enough ways to trigger it. And the thing about Winota is that she digs 6 deep in a 40-card deck. So I think I did the hypergeometric math, and I'm like 60% to hit on a Winota attack on average. And obviously, the way the game is played out, I will probably have cracked some fetch lands, maybe Green Sun Zenith up a non-human creature, done some other things to thin the deck a little bit to make those odds even better. But that is the odds for hitting with Winota. And the thing is, just if you get to resolve Winota and get one of these high-value creatures off of it, it just kind of ends the game. Like, the game's pretty much over unless they're playing control deck and have a board wipe. And in that situation, I actually side out, I think, both of these against the control deck because they're too susceptible to targeted removal at 4 mana. So that is kind of a little bit of the spice the deck has going for it. Titania is definitely the big flashy finisher. It's going to put a ton of power and toughness in play. This is one of the situations where I really wish this deck had more fetch lands. I've only got the 4 fetch lands, and the Wasteland also kind of serves the same role with Titania because it's a land that puts itself in the graveyard and then can also sacrifice itself the moment Titania recurs it to generate that 5/3 guaranteed. And obviously, there are going to be some lines where we're able to resolve Titania with a Knight of the Reliquary in play, and the Knight of the Reliquary can sacrifice a land to go get a fetch land, and that fetch land can sacrifice itself, and all of a sudden we've got, 20 power in play off Titania. That will definitely happen sometimes too. So that's the sort of proactive side of the deck. It's explosive, it's synergistic, and it falls back on just solid mid-range cards. Territorial Kavu, another solid mid-range card, Scavenging Ooze, if we need to. Green Sun Zenith, I think, is a nice little package here. So it can get Scavenging Ooze for Grave Hate, which is important. It can get either of our explosive ramp creatures if we have the other half of what that ramp creature benefits from. It can get Elvish Reclaimer to go and get Field of the Dead if we're in the late game and just want to grind people out. It can go and get Tireless Tracker or Augur of Autumn for card advantage, Knight of the Reliquary for combo potential, and then obviously our 2 win conditions, our 2 big win conditions here, Thalia and the Gitrog Monster and Titania. So there's that. My removal suite is pretty flexible. I have a lot of sideboard removal cards, and what I decided to main deck was March of Otherworldly Light, which is, I think, actually the first white card I took, Arc Trail, Lightning Helix, Vanishing Verse, Shatterskull Smashing, and Bone Crusher Giant. And I guess we can also throw Ren and 6 into the removal package here. Kind of Pia and Kira Nalar. I'm not going to include Pia and Kira Nalar in the removal package, but it can do that. So ultimately we have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 removal spells, which I think is okay. It's not a huge density, so we're not playing like a control deck. We're not going to be removing all of our opponent's threats, and that's how we're going to win. We're only going to be removing the threats we care about to either buy us time to the late game. So cards like Ren and 6 Arc Trail, really good at cleaning up aggro decks and letting us get our big stuff in play and take over the board. Or we're going to be removing the things that really matter, and that's where we get March of Otherworldly Light, Vanishing Verse, those kinds of removal spells in play here, where they're going to be able to remove our key pieces of our opponent, even their like big win conditions here, that will let us just get rid of the stuff that we can't beat on board and then attack otherwise. I think Flyers is going to be a weakness of ours. We have no reach, no flying in this Naya deck, so I guess we do have Thopters from Pia and Kira Nalar. That is something. But for the most part, if our opponent has a flying creature, we're going to have to be able to remove it. I am worried about Murktide Regent, which is actually why I took Vanishing Verse where I did. Vanishing Verse is kind of our only answer to Murktide Regent, which is not great. Though we have a couple more, I think, in the sideboard here. Yeah, we do have Oust in the sideboard to bring in against Murktide Regent. Maybe Sinkhole. Maybe. I mean, if the Regent's too big, which is very often will be, then Sinkhole won't do it. But I really like Oust against Regent because they'll spend their entire graveyard. You just put it on top, and they have to, fill their graveyard again before they can cast it again. A little bit of life gain here in the form of Lightning Helix and Scavenging Ooze to bolster our life total a bit, which would be important because we do have a fairly high damage mana base. Gaia's Cradle is, I think, going to come in. Gaia's Cradle, another very explosive ramp piece that is synergistic. This is not the best Gaia's Cradle deck. I'm not full up on cheap creatures, but the fact that I have ways to go get it, and that I have mana sinks with Scavenging Ooze, Tireless Tracker, and Shatterskull Smashing to dump that mana into if I do have a bunch of creatures in play, I think is going to be quite good. Okay, so here's what I didn't start I didn't start Warden of the First Tree, Oust, Seven's Reclamation. This is the highest picked card I didn't start. I'll talk about that in a second. Twin Shot Sniper, Doomscar Warrior, Wolfbriar Elemental, and then Primordial Mist was just kind of a hate pick, and we have Sinkhole down here. So you can see that Oust, Twin Shot Sniper, Magmatic Sinkhole, that gives us some more options for removal. So we'll talk about specific matchups in a second, but I expect to adjust the removal suite in most matchups to better tailor it to what my opponent is doing. Warden of the First Tree gives us a different kind of threat if we want to, for example, put some pressure on a control deck with only one creature and force them to answer that. This is good against board wipes, I think, a Warden of the First Tree, because it lets you really threaten the board with only one threat. Though, admittedly, our only board wipe player also has a lot of targeted removal, so it's not going to be great there either. Twin Shot Sniper, great against aggro decks, but between Arc Trail, Red and 6, Stomp, I think we have enough of that main deck, and when we want to bring it in, it'll be quite good. It also does have Reach, which might make sense for like Lingering Souls decks that have a lot of small flyers. Excuse me. I'm sorry, I don't edit these. I don't know how to video edit. Okay. Chug of water. Let's talk about our first matchup. This is Alex's Lurrus deck. There's a lot of ways you can build Lurrus. Alex went with a very removal-heavy version of Lurrus. So 9 threats here. 10 if you include Lurrus. Guardian is pretty sticky. Crux is sticky. Otherwise, these things just die to removal. But then, removal spells. Path to Exile, Burst Lightning, Pirate Spellbomb, Deadweight, Flame Slash, Ulcerate, Defile, Disfigure, Soul Partition, Infernal Grasp, Eliminate. Bitter Blossom also a threat. Also Lethal Scheme over there. So, Alex is not really an aggro deck. It's a low curving deck, but it's really more of a controlling deck, to be honest, that is going to use card advantage from Lurrus to kind of get really grindy in the mid and late game, I think. So, in this matchup, what are the cards I'm most worried about? Bitter Blossom's a problem. I don't have any blockers for flyers, and obviously this churns out a bunch of tokens. Now, here's the trade-off. I do think that I will be the aggressor in this matchup. I think I will be the one that is on board early and threatening attacks and pressuring his life total. I also think that even though I have no blockers for flyers, my deck is huge on the ground. I can make, giant Territorial Kavus, giant Scavenging Oozes, Bone Crusher Giant, big Knight of the Reliquaries, and then also really quickly ramp into really big threats. So I think my answer for Bitter Blossom is going to be just to try and beat it on board. I did take the March of Otherworldly Light, specifically so I'd have answer to cards like this, so that is also in my deck. I think most of what I have to worry about here is that these removal spells are going to pick apart my synergies. I'm not going to get to do Arbor Elf, Utopia Sprawl, Wild Growth against this deck, ever. I'm probably not going to get to untap with Lotus Cobra, ever. And then the removal suite is a little bit weak to big toughness creatures, so stuff that can actually kill a 4/4 Territorial Kavu, or a Thalian the Gitrog Monster, or a Winota. There is Flame Slash, Soul Partition, and then Eliminate kills some of those, but not the more expensive ones. So, and Lethal Scheme. So for all the removal that Alex has, he's going to struggle to answer specifically Thalian the Gitrog Monster and Winota. So those cards are really good here. And in this matchup, I honestly think I'll probably end up siding in some combination of Doomscar Warrior and Wolfbriar Elemental. I also think I like Twin Shot Sniper in this matchup because he is going to have small creatures to pick off. It's good against Bitter Blossom. It also had 3 toughness, is a little harder to remove, and 4 mana value. I'm probably in this matchup honestly going to cut some of the ramp. I think I'm going to go down Arbor Elf, Lotus Cobra. These things are just like sitting ducks for his removal, and go up some of these bigger, beefier creatures. And then in terms of me removing his stuff, so Mother of Runes I have to have an early answer for. So I think I don't have a ton of density of removal right now. Like if you untap some Mother of Runes, it's a big problem. And I only have 7 removal spells. So I'm pretty likely to have one in my opening hand. And most of them are castable on turn 2, with the exception of Shatter Skull Smashing. So on the play, if he's on the draw and has Mother of Runes, I will almost always have an answer to it. Playable on turn 1 is much different. I only can play March on turn 1 against Mother of Runes, so a Mother of the Runes on the play will be a kind of a problem for me, to be honest. So that's something to look out for, too. Otherwise, my removal lines up really well against all of his threats. I mean, Guardian of Nubenalia is really hard to remove, but, Arc Trail is a beating in this matchup. Ren and 6 is a huge beating in this matchup. His answers to Ren and 6 are just Eliminate, Burst Lightning, I guess Soul Partition as well. Lethal Scheme as well. Okay, a few more answers than I thought. He does have some answers, but Wrenn and 6 is going to just pick apart his entire board. It'll be really powerful there. And so I think my removal is pretty well lined up already. I don't think I want Oust against a bunch of small creatures. I think I do want the Twin Shot Sniper. I don't think I want Magmatic Sinkhole. So I think the sideboard here is basically Arbor Elf, Lotus Cobra come out. I like the enchantment ramp absent Arbor Elf because he can't interact with enchantments. So that's still going to be a powerful way to like accelerate even without that other ramp. Vanishing Verse. Is Vanishing Verse good here? I think Exile removal is really good against his reanimation spells. So I'm going to definitely play the Vanishing Verse. Maybe Smashing is too slow, or maybe Tireless Tracker is like, maybe it's honestly a card like Tireless Tracker, which is pretty easy for him to remove and also is slow. Like, if I'm going to win on card advantage, it's going to be because I remove all of his stuff, and then I have like an Augur of Autumn grinding him out, and I just go big. And then, yeah, normally you would not want, these 4-drops that have no value against a removal-heavy deck, but so much of his removal just misses these creatures. So I think these 4-drops are really valuable. And this is a matchup where I just want to get a big creature in play he can't deal with and beat him down while I answer his most important stuff. That's that matchup. I think I feel pretty good about this matchup. I think I will win this match if I'm estimating. I should say, too, as I go through and talk about all my opponent's decks, I'm not criticizing their deck in the abstract or saying I think Alex drafted a bad deck, for example, because I'm not looking at any of his other matchups. I'm just saying my matchup against my Naya mid-range deck, I think I like this matchup. His small removal is not going to hit the most important stuff, and he has relatively few threats for my 7 removal spells to pick apart more after sideboarding. So I think he's going to be pressuring his own life total. I'm going to be pressuring his life total, and I think it's an okay matchup for me. So I'm calling a win here. All right. Let's look at Steve's deck. So Steve ended up starting red-white, but ended up drafting a Jeskai Tempo Prowess deck. So we've got Ragavan, Giver of Runes are kind of problems for me early on, and then cards like Ledger Shredder, harder for me to remove. Clarion Spirit turns out a lot of tokens. Monastery Mentor, a big problem if it sticks, but hopefully I'll have an answer to it most of the time. And then down here, so Steve has a bunch of things that are really only good with creatures in play. So Mutagenic Growth, Umajawa's Jite, Smuggler's Copter. It's hard to stick a creature in this cube. I'm actually one of the removal light decks at 7 removal spells, and so these cards are better against me than they will be in some other matchups, but I think Steve will find that these cards are kind of a liability in a lot of matchups because it's so hard to actually stick a threat. So what do I think of this matchup? Again, my removal is pretty good here because there's a lot of small threats. There's nothing beefy. So again, Wrenn and 6 looking great. Arc Trail looking great. Shadow Skull Smashing looking great in this matchup, I think. Get to the mid game and just, split it up. In terms of counter spells, he only has Remand. So, and I guess Force Spike. A main deck Force Spike I should keep in mind when I am deciding how I sequence things. But the question really here is, I think this is kind of a... So here's the thing with Steve's deck. I think Steve's mana is bad. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 white sources. Very, very few. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 blue sources, which is I think barely acceptable. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 red sources, again, kind of barely acceptable. So I think, here, my deck does have to worry about a turn 1 Ragavan, especially on the play, because, again, my removal for a good 1-drop on the play is minimal. But I don't think Steve is going to very reliably have that with only 8 red sources. The chances of having Ragavan and a red source in his hand, we could do the hypergeometric math, but it's a lot less likely than if he had, 12 red sources or something. So hopefully that's not a huge concern. And if I take a hit from a Ragavan, you take a hit from a Ragavan. People act like it's the end of the world, but it's not the end of the world, and I have so much 2-mana removal to just pick that thing off, and he has basically no ways to protect it. So outside of Force Spike, Mutagenic Growth is a protection spell in this matchup. It's worth noting. I mean, a lot of my removal is damage-based or toughness-based, so that is going to effectively blank some removal spells pretty often. But all in all, not a ton of ways to protect Ragavan. He's trying to go faster than me with cards like Monastery Swift Spear, Mutagenic Growth, trying to go faster and then having this sort of late game value with these sort of spells matter interactions. So again, kind of comparing here, I think my stuff is beefier. On board, my deck is going to win if I can stick my threats. How is his removal from my stuff? Firebolt, Seal of Fire, Magma Jet, Fire, and Electrolyze. So no removal for anything over 2 toughness in the entire deck. at all. So that means that my Scavenging Ooze, which I won't play in this matchup unless I also have green to activate it, Territorial Kavu, Deeproot Wayfinder, Bone Crusher Giant, Knight of the Reliquary, Augur of Autumn. These are all going to be really safe creatures. And so I think, let me close this tab. We already talked about that deck. So I think this is actually going to be a good matchup for me too. And look, this was a rotisserie draft, so all the decks were face up. I knew what everyone was drafting when I made my picks, so I certainly hope my deck is good, right? Because I knew everything that was going on. I hope to estimate a winning record. Obviously, we'll see how it actually pans out, but I think this is a good matchup for me too. I also expect to win this match. And in terms of sideboarding, what do I bring in or out here? Doesn't have a ton of removal, so I keep all the explosive rampant synergy stuff. I should say, too, Savin's Reclamation might be a card for the Lurrus matchup, given how much removal he has. The question is, how much do I side out of things that Savin's Reclamation can get back and side into 4-drops? But that's a question we'll answer when we get to it. This matchup, I'm not worried about the removal. Removal is pretty minimal, and I don't have as many targets for it. Like, my targets for 2 toughest removal are Reclaimer, only when I don't have enough lands in the graveyard, Arbor Elf, Lotus Cobra, Tireless Tracker if I don't have mana up to crack a clue. That's it. That's the things you can remove with 2 toughness. I guess the Goblins of Fable the Mirror Breaker. So it's not that his removal is bad in this matchup, but I think it's going to miss a lot of really important stuff. Smuggler's Copter is maybe my biggest problem here. The fact that it is a source of card selection. It's a flyer. It comes down early and pressures life totals. That I got to be worried about. I don't have enough removal to keep him off of anything to crew it. And my ways to remove the Copter are Lightning Helix, March of Otherworldly Light. Honestly, I might bring in Oust specifically for Copter here. Yeah, maybe. So yeah, I think this is going to be a win, and I think our main deck configuration is pretty okay for this matchup. That's my prediction. So far, I'm predicting 2-0. It's not going to be that way the entire way through, I promise. Okay, here's Evan's Jund deck. This deck ended up pretty spooky, I think. So where should we start? This deck is highly interactive, and it's also not that aggressive. This is kind of similar to the Lurrus deck in that it's threat light, but it does have Liliana, other Liliana, and Chandra down here, which are all kind of threats. The Veil's not really a threat as much as Last Hope and Torch of Defiance are. But so we're looking at 6, 7, 10 threats, including the Planeswalkers, which is more than the Lurrus deck, but a ton of interaction. Duress, Tarfire, Bone Shards, Dreadfuge, Cling to Dust, Thoughtseize, Lightning Bolt, Collective Brutality, Abrade, Heartless Act, Witherbloom Command, K-Command, Mawlock. So this is basically another mid-range deck. This is like a mid-range mirror here between the Naya deck and the Jund deck. My deck does go a little bigger than his, so I will be able to, if I can get there, a card like Titania will, I think, close out this game. Thalian the Gitrog monster is pretty good here, though it does die to Heartless Act, Bone Shards, just Heartless Act and Bone Shards, and I guess a really big Mawlock. So, but this is a game where, we're also going to be fighting and attacking each other on the ground. He also has no flyers, right? Yeah, no flyers. So this is going to be a ground-pounding mirror. And I think I go bigger than him, but I definitely have worse removal than him. So who wins versus a bigger deck or one with better removal? I'm worried about this matchup. I think the removal here is going to kind of pick me apart because we do have Heartless Act and Bone Shards for the really big stuff, as well as down-ticking Liliana the Veil. I don't have a ton of creatures. Well, that's not true. I mean, I do have more creatures than his deck does, for example. I have 8, 11, 12, 13, 14 creatures, but I'm not making a bunch of tokens. I'm not going super wide. I'm kind of going big, and so I think it's very reasonable that I'll have 3 or 4 creatures, and then he'll pick off a couple of removal spells, and then be able to use the downtick on Liliana to take off the, get rid of the big stuff. Chandra also a removal spell for the big creatures, right? Deals 4 damage. Yeah, that'll also pick off stuff. So I think this is a rougher matchup. The question is, how do I side against it? Do I also go heavier on removal, given how few threats Evan is playing, and just try and take him off of... Wow, not playing Young Pyromancer. That's a little bit surprising. I wonder if he brings in Deluge against me, too. We'll see. Or maybe he just tries to go big and brings in Garruk Primetime. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how they're going to sideboard. What do I sideboard here? Nothing is specifically bad, I don't think. Though I do think I don't like Winota. Well... It's a real tension, right? Because Winota and Thalia look really bad against Bone Shards, Chandra, Liliana of the Veil, Heartless Act. But if they stick for a turn or two, they will absolutely be the thing that lets me go over the top, right? This is the kind of deck where if I get to hit with Winota and get a couple creatures, it's lights out, unless he sides in the board wipe. My stuff's going to be huge. So I'm actually not sure what to do here. I feel a little bit lost in this matchup, and I also don't really know how to predict the outcome. Let me think about this. All right, how much room for small stuff do we have again? Tarfire, Lightning Bolt, Collective Brutality, Abrade. Okay, so maybe here's where there's a little bit of an edge to be gained. I think the removal in this deck is mostly for the big stuff that matters and not for the small stuff. So I think I bring in Sevin's Reclamation here for sure. I want that card advantage. I think I bring in Warden of the First Tree here as well. And at the point that I'm doing that, I wonder if... What do I cut? Is this not a Vanishing Verse matchup? There's a lot of gold cards. So Vanishing Verse hits 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It does hit the Planeswalkers, though. It's so good against the Planeswalkers. I think I got to keep it. It's a little narrow, but also it's Library, the Planeswalkers. Is this a matchup where we take out March? No, it can't be. I don't know. Honestly, I'm going to have to play this one by ear and see how the first game goes for how I side against this deck. But this is so far the matchup I think I'm most worried about. So let's go ahead and give me a loss. Let's say I'm going to take a loss on this one. 2-1 so far. Yeah. All right, moving on. Whew. This is Zach's blue-white control deck, and this is a bad matchup for me, I think. I think I lose this one probably. So now I'm predicting 2-2. This is kind of the nut blue-white control deck. He's not main decking balance, which I think is a mistake. But he's got his own card evaluation. He's an extremely good player, much better than me, so maybe he knows what he's talking about there. I just think balance with Teferi, all these other Planeswalkers is such a huge game. But yeah, this deck's got Terminus, it's got Brainstorm, and Portent, and Mystic Sanctuary, and Jace to set up that Terminus. It's got Counter Magic, it's got targeted removal in the form of Swords to Plowshares, Prismatic Ending, Engineered Explosives. I don't think it's a good matchup for me. So let's talk about how I do side in against it. I think I'm going to lose this one, but I think I bring in the Sevin's Reclamation. It's really good against control, I think. And then here's the thing. While this deck is a really good control deck, it has minimal win conditions, right? Win conditions are Vidillion Click, Snapcaster Mage. I do see he did main deck for Teferi, which is a really late pick for him, so that I think is probably why. I think he looked through his deck and figured he had kind of few win conditions. And then the Wandering Emperor. I can kill any of those with Vanishing Verse. Those two creatures are easy to get rid of with my removal spells, but I think here I got to take out removal and just try and win proactively. So Reclamation comes in. Arc Trail comes out. I still like, well, it also can hit face. I did prioritize burn spells that could hit my opponent's face, but I think Arc Trail still comes out in favor of Sevin's Reclamation. I think one of my main win conditions here actually is going to be Field of the Dead. And just Sevin's Reclamation to get back Field of the Dead or, Field of the Dead and 2 other lands. I think it's a really big game. It also obviously just can grind with creatures, so I think I should be looking at the Field of the Dead plan here. I do cut the 4 drops here, I think, because Swords of Plowshares, Prismatic Ending, Instant Speed, Terminus. I don't want to cast a 4-drop into Mystic Confluence or Cryptic Command. So I'm going to cut Thalia, Winota, maybe P and Kieran Nalaar, and go up Reclamation, Warden of the First Tree. See, this is the thing. I don't really have enough to side into this match. It's such a hard matchup for me. I guess I end up keeping the Arc Trail because it does go face. But I'm taking these 4 drops out. I think I keep Titania in because... Oh, gosh. I don't know. This is a rough matchup. I'm going to lose this one. I'm calling it right now. I think this is maybe the best deck at the table, too. I will say in passing. But, yeah. I think I'm losing this one. I couldn't draft against every single deck, and this is the one I think I have the worst matchup against. So, get it out of here. All right. Here's Scott's Grixis Tempo deck. All right, this deck I think is pretty similar in some ways to Steve's Jeskai deck in that it's got these snowballing spells matter threats with a suite of small spells to support it. I believe that just like Steve, Scott is light on removal too. What do we have here? We have Prismari Command, Unholy Heat, Forked Bolt, Cut Down. And then Ironcrag Pyromancer, which I think is a much better card than people give it credit for. It could be an issue here. So the removal's not that deep. Counter Magic is just Force of Will. Can't play around it. Not going to bother trying. The cards that really matter in this matchup are Murktide Regent. An early Murktide Regent will really mess me up. I have very few answers for it. And if it comes down early, I won't be able to race it. So that's potentially a big problem. I have answers for Dreadhorde Arcanist, so I'm not super worried about that. Mastermind is not that great against me. I'm not drawing a lot of cards. Kess will be a problem if it sticks, as most 4-drops that have that kind of value should be. And yeah, I think we can apply a lot of the same logic we applied to our matchup against Steve here. And I think this is a good matchup for me too. I'm going to be able to answer the small stuff. Kess, Tossiger, the Delve cards are going to be maybe the biggest problem, and I do have, removal for them. So I might bring in like a Magmatic Sinkhole here, because even if I can't answer a Murktide Regent with it, it does kill a Tossiger, it kills a Kess. So I think Sinkhole comes in here. I also think I bring Oust in here for sure against these big creatures. And then what do I cut in this matchup? None of my cards are specifically liabilities here, I don't think. Like, unlike the last matchup, I don't have cards that are specifically bad. There's not enough small removal for me to want to cut the explosive ramp. Scavenging Ooze is an all-star in this matchup. I think here I might go down... Because look at these 4-drops again. I might go down Winota, Pia, and Kieran, and go 2 more removal spells. Sinkhole, Oust. Not a Savin's Reclamation matchup either, because there's not a ton of removal floating around. But I think this is a win. So what are we at? We're at 3 and 2, right? Yeah, that makes sense, because then I have two more to decide. All right. We have Parker's deck. This is the one match I'm most invested in. I want so badly to win this match. These cards are in a ridiculous order. I'm not sure what order this is. Maybe Parker built this on mobile. Let me actually just go ahead and make this a little more clear for my own benefit. So Exploration goes down here. Let's see. Put these at the bottom. That goes there. Once Upon a Time, that's basically a land. This is a big ramp spell. Life from Alum goes down here. Tarmogoyf stays there. Corsair, Leovold, Briarbridge Tracker. Let's just put these in color order real quick. Grist, I think I'm going to put up here as a threat. Nissa here is a threat. Chariot. Pilgrim. All right. I think Parker's deck is really good. Parker and I have very similar card evaluations, so that's no surprise that I think that. All right, what are we looking at here? So threat-wise, I think I have enough answers for Uro, which is the number 1 card I should be worried about here. I have Scavenging Ooze, which is really good against Uro, and I have the March of Otherworldly Light to actually exile it. And I think in this matchup, I maybe even bring in Oust, though ousting Uro nowhere near as good as ousting a Murktide Regent. I mean, they still have to have cards to escape it, but you're just letting him gain more life and draw more cards, which will prolong the game and get him to the point where that can actually work. So I think I have answers for Uro. I think he's going to more consistently have Uro than I'm going to have answers for it, but I will see it coming, and hopefully I can put enough pressure on him that will matter. Grist is really good against me. The hard removal is good, and he'll have creatures to throw into the Grist mill, as it were. I think Life from Loam is not good here, so I'm not worried about Life from Loam loops. I think Retrofitter Foundry, I don't think this is a very good Retrofitter Foundry or Urza Saga deck, to be honest. I think Parker will most often find himself in a position where it is not correct to actually make a construct, because this deck is like a curve-out mid-range deck. It's not playing reactive answers where you can hold up mana to then dump into Saga or Retrofitter Foundry, so I'm not worried about those cards. He's got the Sensei's Top combo going on here with Courser of Krufix and Exploration, but that's going to be pretty tricky to set up. Leovold is super annoying. It's just a really solid mid-range card against me. I'll have to remove it. He'll get to draw a card. It's going to be a 2-for-1. I just got to accept that. Chariot is really good. I thought about prioritizing this a little more early, but it doesn't really work with my deck for a lot of reasons. Like, it doesn't work with Green Sun Zenith. It doesn't work with Winota. So it's a little bit of a lower priority for me than it probably was for him, which is why he got it. And he does have mana here to activate Golos, but I think I win the really long games here, I dare say. I think in the really long games, I have time to find answers for things like Uro, and I have stuff like Field of the Dead, and Titania goes bigger than any of his cards go. So Titania really wrecks face here. Removal, he's got Push, Bloodchief's Thirst, Abrupt Decay. There's only 3 of them, but they're very premium removal spells. They're extremely powerful. So, and Grist, I should say. So 4 removal spells. Later on removal than me, so more proactive. So if he's more proactive than me, do I want to side in even more removal and just try and... All right, look, I don't actually know how this is going to go, but I'm going to call the win here as well. I think this is going to be really close, and I would not be surprised to lose this match, but I want to win so badly that I'm going to have to call it. We'll see if he can get something like Golos, Chariot, Nissa down, if he actually can resolve or Leovold and stick it. He's not even a good Jarell deck. I mean, Jarell's really good with Sensei's top, but what other card draw do we have? Uro, I guess, but if you're already drawing a card every turn with Uro, then, I mean, Jarell's just icing on the cake. Briarbridge Tracker can draw a card. So yeah, honestly, I think this deck is a little unfocused. It has really powerful cards like Deathrite Shaman, Jarell, Tarmogoyf, Uro, Leovold, Chariot, Golos, Nissa, Abrupt Decay, Top, Retrofitter Foundry. I just think they're kind of combined in a funky way that a lot of them aren't going to be maximized. At least that's what I'm hoping. Yeah. I think generally I'm bigger on the board than he is. I mean, my 2-drops, except for Goyf. Goyf is better than my 2-drops, but my Kavu, Deeproot Wayfinder, and Scavengers are going to brawl with everything down here. My 3-drops, Uro's obviously better than anything I've got, but like a big Tyrus Tracker, a big Knight of the Reliquary is going to brawl with everything else. My 4-drops are great. I think sticking these in this matchup is going to be huge. This is a good Winota matchup. He's not going to have removal for all my threats, so I'm going to get to stick some non-human threats. I'm going to get to play my Winota, attack with it, and just go all out. I think Winota's huge in this matchup, as is Titania. I really just want to go big and like make my deck do its big synergistic thing against a deck that doesn't have enough removal to stop me. The last matchup is just Anthony's mono white deck, which he has not built to my knowledge. I asked him for a link. He hasn't sent me one. This mono white deck is probably the most aggressive deck at the table, because there wasn't really like a red aggressive deck. A lot of these red decks are more mid-rangey or tempo-oriented. It's the most aggressive deck at the table. I think it's the matchup where my removal spells are going to be the best. Arc Trail, Ren and 6, Lightning Helix, Shatter Skull Smashing, Stomp. These are all incredible removal spells against Anthony's deck. He only has a couple cards I need to be worried about, I think. And unsurprisingly, the ones that are high up here. Esper Sentinel is going to be annoying. I just got to deal with it. He might get to draw a card off of it, which is kind of annoying, but it happens sometimes. Adeline's a big problem at 4 toughness. My removal for Adeline is really nothing main deck outside of March of Otherworldly Light. So I think I do bring in Magmatic Sinkhole in this matchup because I am worried about Adeline specifically, which will get out of hand very, very quickly. So that's a potential concern. I'm not worried about Skullclamp here, honestly. I don't think Anthony has a great Skullclamp deck. He's not making a bunch of tokens. I actually think with the Stoneforge Mystic, he's mostly going to end up getting Glimmer Lens. That's my sort of called shot. Apparition's really great. It's going to remove my stuff. Lion Sash really good, but I can remove it, hopefully. So I think this is a good matchup, too, which means at the end of the day, I'm calling a record of 5-2. Again, like I said, that might sound cocky, but this was a Roto draft. I got to see the entire decks as they were drafted. If I don't end up at the end thinking I'm going to have a winning record, at least expecting to have a winning record, then I've just like willfully drafted badly. So obviously I think I drafted one of the best seats of the table because I made those choices. My worst matchups, I think, are Zach, Evan, and Parker. Those are the ones I think Zach is my worst matchup. I expect to lose that one. Evan and Parker are both on the fringe. I expect to lose one of those two. And then I'm hoping to do well against Alex, Steve, Scott, and Anthony. All right. I'm excited for all these videos. I hope you've enjoyed this lengthy deck tech and analysis of the Roto draft. The videos will be going up one by one every day. Whenever I post this, I'm not even sure when this is going to get posted, but I hope you enjoyed all this. I'm really excited to record all these matches. It's going to be a full sampling of the Bun Magic Cube. You know, between all 8 of us, we have every single card in the cube in our pool, so if the card is worth playing, people have a chance to play it against me, and we'll see how this deck can do. I am going to have fun playing the games no matter what. All right, like and subscribe, blah, 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 hugs and kisses.